Some silences weigh more than screams. A mother can give everything, always be there, hold up even what she no longer has the strength to carry, and still watch her son stop looking at her with respect. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow erosion, almost invisible. But one day you realize he no longer listens to you, no longer asks you anything, no longer sees you. This isn't about blame or punishment, it's a consequence. Because without realizing it, you gave so much that he stopped seeing you as a person. And if you don't choose yourself, he won't either. Today, we're going to step into that fracture. We're going to look directly at why an adult son might stop respecting his mother even when she's done everything for him. We'll approach it through stoicism, not as a theory, but as a tool for healing without dependence, for reclaiming your place without begging for love. There will be 9 lessons, each one deeper than the last. But the final one could completely change the way you relate to yourself. I'm Gabriel. Stay with me until the end because this isn't just a video. It's a key to reclaiming your center, your dignity, and your voice. Have you ever felt like a lit lamp in a room? No one enters. You're there, shining with what little you have left, hoping someone notices your light. But the room stays empty. Your son, the one you gave life to, the one you cared for even when you were broken yourself, barely listens to you now. And not because he hates you, not because he's forgotten you, but because he's stopped seeing you as someone worthy of respect. It's not something he says, not something he yells, but you feel it. In the way he answers, in the tone he uses when he cuts you off, in the times he leaves you talking to yourself. And as painful as it is, it needs to be said. He didn't change overnight. You played a part in that forgetting too. This is the first step on our journey, and we need to begin with the deepest wound, when love turns into emotional debt. Because often, without meaning to, without even realizing it, a mother begins to give in a way that doesn't free but chains. She gives too much at the wrong times out of fear of losing, and the child stops feeling gratitude and starts feeling obligation. An obligation over time turns into resentment. This isn't about blaming you, it's about opening your eyes. Because if you keep giving without limit, without pause, without awareness, you'll drain yourself. And when a mother is empty, she stops being a guide and becomes a shadow. Children don't respect shadows. They respect solid presence. And that begins when you stop giving out of fear that he'll walk away and start giving out of love for yourself. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met a woman who told me, "I gave everything to my son, absolutely everything. I never had anything of my own. It was all for him. And now, every time he calls, it's to ask me for something. He doesn't even ask how I'm doing. He only comes to me when he needs something." I asked her if she had ever said no. She looked at me surprised and said, "Say no to him? That would feel like a betrayal." But that betrayal had actually been toward herself, because by never setting limits, by not acknowledging her right to exist outside the role of mother, she had created a bond where respect had been replaced by habit. Seneca once said, "The giver must know when to stop, and the receiver when to be grateful." But if you never stopped giving, if you never asked for genuine thanks, how do you expect him to understand that what you gave mattered too? There comes a time in life when love alone isn't enough. You have to look at how you loved. And if that love turned into a chain, it needs to be broken, not to destroy the bond, but to heal it. Because no one respects someone who denies themselves in the name of another. If you're still waiting for respect just because of all you've done, you'll keep waiting. Respect begins when you treat yourself with dignity, when you pause, when you choose peace over habit, when you stop begging for affection disguised as help. This is the truth many don't want to hear. Being a mother is not enough to be respected. You must also be a woman, a person, a soul, a voice of your own. And that starts now. Because if you don't see yourself, he won't either. If you don't respect yourself, he won't know how. This is the first step, the most painful but also the most liberating. Understanding that love, if it isn't free, becomes a debt. And you weren't born to be in debt to anyone. You were born to be a beacon, not a chain. And that beacon starts to shine the moment you recognize yourself, not when you sacrifice yourself. What we talked about earlier can't be fixed with a single conversation or an apology. It requires an inner transformation, and that transformation runs into a second obstacle, silent but devastating, that many people don't dare to face. Because it's both comforting and painful. We've reached the second key point in this video, and it's this: the mistake of always being available. For years, you had to be. Because there was no other choice. Because no one else was going to handle what you handled. Because if you weren't there, everything would fall apart. But the problem isn't that you were strong. The problem is that you never stopped being strong, even when it was no longer necessary, even when it began costing you your health, your dignity, and your self-respect. Being constantly available isn't a virtue, it's exhaustion disguised as devotion. And the most dangerous part is that constant availability eventually makes you invisible, not because others are cruel, but because you taught them that you'd always be there. And what's always there gets taken for granted. In Stoic philosophy, there's an idea that might sting, but it's essential. What is given without discernment loses its value. Marcus Aurelius often said that action without awareness becomes routine, and routine kills meaning. You're so used to fixing things, being ready, responding at the first call, that you no longer realize this stopped being generosity and became a way of erasing yourself. And when you erase yourself, others learn to overlook you. Think about your day. How many times have you put off resting just to answer a message? How many times have you cancelled plans, a nap, a simple pleasure, because someone asked you for something, and they don't do it because they don't care? They do it because they know you'll say yes, always, without asking, without pause, without conditions. That's not love, that's depletion. Now, the root of this trap isn't just in what you do, it's in what you fear, because often you're always available not out of kindness, but out of fear. Fear of being irrelevant. Fear that if you're not there, you'll be forgotten. Fear that if you put yourself first, you'll be judged. But let me tell you something that might shake you. Someone who respects you doesn't do so because you're always there. They respect you when they see that you also have limits, that your life doesn't revolve solely around them, that you matter too. Being stoic at this stage in life isn't about hardening or closing yourself off to love. It's about learning to discern when to say yes and when to say no with the same peace. It's about understanding that your time, your body, your energy are no longer endless. And using them wisely is an act of respect for yourself and for those still around you. The spiritual side matters too. A soul that never rests doesn't shine. It dims. Silence that isn't yours becomes noise. And service given without measure becomes a burden, not a blessing. God doesn't ask you to erase yourself. He asks you to care for yourself so you can keep being light. And a light that isn't cared for will fade, not because it breaks, but because no one protects it. When you're always accessible, you become background, and no one respects what they see as background. Respect is born from boundaries, from pause, from the ability to say, "I can't today." Not as rejection, but as affirmation, because your body needs rest too. Your mind needs space. Your spirit needs silence. If you keep denying yourself, don't expect others to recognize you, because you're the one sending the message that your needs can wait. And over time, that becomes a form of self-abandonment. This isn't about becoming indifferent, it's about learning to prioritize yourself, because no one else will if you don't do it first. And when you start saying no without guilt, without needing to explain, you'll notice something amazing. Respect returns. Your voice grows stronger. Peace settles in, because you stopped being available for everything and started being present for what truly matters, including you. We've already seen how respect begins to crumble when you give without limits and when you're always available as if your existence had no center of its own. But there's a third route, more subtle, more dangerous, that often disguises itself as humility, vulnerability, emotional openness, and ends up making you lose authority without even realizing it. We've reached the third point in this video, and this is where things begin to shift. When your son sees you as a victim, not a guide. In many homes, in countless quiet stories, the mother was the one who held everything together. But she was also the one who cried the most in silence, who felt overwhelmed, confused, unprotected. And that's human. But there's something we need to understand urgently. When that vulnerability doesn't transform into growth, when it becomes a permanent narrative, the son stops seeing you as a beacon and starts seeing you as a burden. You're no longer the woman who shaped him. You're the one who complains. You're no longer the voice that inspires. You're the echo of unresolved pain. Stoicism teaches us not to deny pain, but to elevate it. There's a difference between saying I was hurt and saying this made me stronger. There's a difference between sharing your pain and settling into it as your identity. When a mother speaks constantly from the wound without building a bridge toward transformation, her son doesn't just distance himself, he stops admiring her. And without admiration, respect fades until it disappears. There's one concrete strategy you can start applying today that will completely shift this dynamic. Start telling your story from a place of strength, not pity. Don't lie, don't sugarcoat, but choose words that reflect growth, not abandonment. Instead of saying, I've suffered a lot, say, I've been through a lot and I'm still standing. Instead of repeating that you're alone, say, I've learned to be with myself and to find peace in the silence. This way of speaking isn't just about style, it's transformational, because you're not just what happened to you, you're what you decide to do with it now. Let me give you a simple but powerful example. Imagine two women who've both experienced abandonment, betrayal, disappointment. One of them, every time she speaks to her son, repeats that no one loves her, that she's tired, that she gave everything and got nothing in return. The other, when she talks, acknowledges her pain, but also shares what she's learned, what she wants to build now, what she's rediscovered in herself. Both lived through tragedy, but only one continues to inspire respect. Because she didn't stay in the wound, she turned it into a path. Seneca said, "No one admires the one who complains. We admire the one who endures with dignity." And you, who have endured so much, deserve to be seen with that dignity. But for that to happen, you have to start telling your story differently, not for others, for yourself, because your son is also listening to how you speak about yourself. And if you only see yourself as a victim, he'll stop seeing you as a guide. If what you've heard so far is striking a chord, if some part of you feels this conversation was necessary, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It's a simple but powerful way to help this message reach other women who, like you, need to remember who they are. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and if these words resonated with you, write, "I choose to speak from my strength." Because we still have important lessons ahead, and the last one might just give you the key to reclaim your center without having to argue it with anyone. We're just getting started. We've just talked about the importance of telling your story from strength, not from the wound, about moving away from seeing yourself as a victim and beginning to recognize yourself as a guide. But that inner transformation, which may sound simple in words, becomes almost impossible unless you uncover a trap you've carried for years without noticing, because there's something even deeper that has quietly taken root in your mind, something that sabotages your choices even when you want to change. The fourth point on this journey is as painful as it is necessary: confusing respect with fear, obedience, or dependence. Many older women carry the belief that if their children do what they say, it means they respect them. That if they consult them, need them, or obey them, then everything is fine. But what many don't realize is that this respect is fragile, conditional, sometimes even manipulated, because what you often receive isn't true respect, but fear of your reaction, guilt disguised as attention, or simply the habit of emotional dependency. And while you think everything's in order, what's really being eroded is your true authority, the kind that doesn't demand or plead, the kind that inspires without pressure. This dynamic settles in slowly, almost invisibly. It starts when you correct your son out of anger instead of calm. It continues when he feels he owes you something and you allow that debt to define the relationship. It solidifies when you start believing that if he no longer depends on you, he'll stop loving you. And one day, that son no longer sees you as someone to follow, but as someone to avoid, to manage, or in the worst case, to manipulate. Because when respect is based on fear or dependency, it doesn't survive growth. The moment he feels free, he'll leave, and he won't return with admiration, but with exhaustion. True respect doesn't come from need or fear. It comes from example, from composure, from quiet consistency. Marcus Aurelius spoke of inner nobility, that strength that doesn't shout or demand, but is felt the moment you walk into a room. That's the energy that transforms. But you can't embody that presence if you still believe that controlling your son means having his love. It doesn't. And it never will. The consequences of this trap are brutal. You become a woman who doesn't know how to let go, who measures her worth by the attention she receives, who panics when the phone doesn't ring, when no one checks in, when no one asks her opinion. You become the guardian of a kind of obedience that no longer makes sense, but you're afraid to lose it because you believe that without it, you have no place. And that fear makes you dependent too, on his messages, his choices, his moods. But there's another way, a harder one, yes, but infinitely more dignified. It's the path where you let go of that idea of control, that false power that only drains you, and you begin to build a new kind of respect, one that doesn't need approval or fear or dependency. The respect of a woman who no longer needs to be obeyed because she's learned to listen to herself, who no longer begs to be seen because she already sees herself, who no longer pleads, she affirms. When you understand this, something inside you shifts. You stop trying to control your relationship with your son. You begin to heal it from within, without demands, without emotional blackmail, without building castles in the air. Just you, guided by your dignity. Because there is no bond stronger than the one born from freedom. And that kind of respect, the one that comes from choice, not debt, is the only kind that lasts. And it's the only kind you truly deserve. Respect isn't lost in an argument or a misunderstanding. It fades through the repetition of an invisible mistake that slowly becomes a way of life. And one of the most common mistakes, the one that quietly cracks the soul and wears down the relationship with an adult son, is the one we're about to face now. We've reached the fifth point of this video, and it needs to be addressed head-on. Giving without limits, expecting without saying a word. This is a silent wound, because you give and give, not just material things, but your time, energy, patience, attention, and presence. But you don't give with total freedom. You give with the hope of getting something in return. Even if you don't say it, even if you deny it, you still hope. You hope for a call that never comes, a word that's never said, a recognition that never arrives, and when it doesn't come, it hurts. But you don't talk about it. You swallow it. You replay it in your mind. You bottle it up until one day you explode. And when that happens, it's too late. The other person doesn't understand why you're upset. Because you never told them what you expected. Because you believed love should be guessed. This silent giving, loaded with unspoken expectations, becomes a form of emotional torture for you and for others. You feel used. They feel pressured. And in the middle of that misunderstanding, something deeper breaks, the possibility of a healthy bond. Because anything that is given without limit and without words ends up being seen as obligation, not love. The consequences of living this way are devastating. You become someone who loves with resentment, who helps but feels empty, who is there but quietly carries a hidden anger. And that anger, sooner or later, leaks out. It shows in your tone, in your gaze, in the weight of your silences. The other person senses it, even if they don't understand where it's coming from. And they start to pull away, not because they don't love you, but because they feel they can't give you what you expect, even though you've never said a word. But this isn't irreversible. Nothing is, as long as you're willing to look at yourself with honesty. To break this pattern, you need to adopt a new mindset, not one of coldness, but of clarity. Give only what you can give joyfully without expecting anything in return. And when you do expect something, say it, calmly, clearly, with respect for yourself and for the other. Because waiting in silence is a form of self-deception. And self-deception is slow poison. Stoicism makes it clear, what doesn't depend on you should not govern you. And other people's responses don't depend on you. What you can control is your decision to speak up, to set limits, to stop offering yourself as a sacrifice in hopes that one day, finally, someone will see you. Because that day won't come unless you see yourself first. You're not here to be anyone's martyr. You're here to live with dignity, with self-respect, with healthy boundaries. And that begins when you decide that your generosity will no longer be a disguise for your need. When you choose to give because you want to, not because you're afraid that if you stop giving, they'll stop loving you. What's at stake isn't just your son's respect, it's your respect for yourself. And that is entirely in your hands. We've already said it. Giving without limits and waiting in silence is a slow way to wear yourself down. It's like digging a well with bare hands, hoping that one day respect will spring forth. But if you stay in that place, if you refuse to name what hurts, if you don't pause to examine how you're living this stage of life, what's coming isn't peace, it's emptiness. And that emptiness doesn't warn you, it settles in, and when it does, there aren't enough words to explain what you lost by not choosing yourself in time. That's why we now come to the sixth point in this journey, one that's painful to face, but liberating once you understand it. When your peace becomes negotiable, your son stops seeing you. I want you to pause for a moment and imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror, not the one in your bathroom, a deeper one, an inner mirror. You look at yourself and ask, how many times have I betrayed myself just to avoid conflict? How many times have I silenced what I felt, said yes when everything in me screamed no, accepted the unacceptable out of fear of being left alone? That silent, daily, constant negotiation, that's what's been weakening your dignity. Because when a mother trades her peace to keep her son close, he doesn't respect her more. He tolerates her. He uses her. He avoids her. But he no longer admires her. You didn't come to this stage of life to tiptoe around other people's comfort. You came to live from your center, to step into your maturity with the strength that comes from having been through it all. But if every time your son raises his voice, you lower yours, if every time he ignores you, you make excuses for him, If every time he crosses a line, you smile to keep the peace, then you're no longer being yourself. You've become a reflection of his comfort. And the person who lives just to avoid upsetting others eventually becomes invisible. Peace isn't something you give away. It's something you protect. And you, without even realizing it, have been giving yours away for years in exchange for scraps of affection. Then you wonder why he doesn't call, why he doesn't listen, why he looks at you with impatience, with weariness. It's because he no longer sees strength, he sees weakness. And no one respects what they see as weak and silent. This stage of life isn't about asking for permission. It's about drawing lines, about saying, this is okay, this is not. Calmly, but with conviction. Because if your son pulls away the moment you start setting boundaries, then what held him to you wasn't love. It was habit. And it's better to lose a habit than to keep losing yourself. I know it hurts. The fear of being alone can be paralyzing, but there's a loneliness worse than being physically alone, the loneliness of not being seen, even when you're with others, of being surrounded, but never truly heard, of giving up every piece of yourself until you no longer know who you were. And that can't go on. Because when you negotiate your peace, you're teaching others that your well-being has a price, that your time, your body, your emotions are up for trade, and no one, hear me clearly, no one respects what's on sale. You don't need to shout, you don't need to argue. You just need to decide that your peace is sacred, that it's not for sale, that it will never again be the price for someone else's affection. And when you do that, something changes. Maybe not right away. Maybe it'll hurt at first. But that quiet firmness begins to resonate, and those who choose to stay will know they must do so from a place of respect, not out of habit. Because at the end of the day, true love is not built on silent sacrifice. It's built on truth, on boundaries, and on the calm strength of someone who's finally learned never to negotiate herself again. If you've made it this far, you already know that respect can't be demanded or bought. It's built from inner alignment. In the previous chapter, I showed you how putting your peace up for sale guarantees you'll be treated like something disposable, not like a presence of value. But there's something deeper we need to say, because without this, everything else falls apart. We're at the 7th point of this journey, and it may be the most honest and challenging of all. If you don't choose yourself, he won't choose you either. Take a close look at your life. Look at every gesture, every decision you've made out of fear, guilt, or the need to be loved. How many times have you put your own desires on hold because you thought, now's not the right time? How many times have you silenced your discomfort just to keep someone's affection? How many times have you waited for your son to figure out what you need without you saying a word? Now ask yourself, what part of you expects respect if you're not respecting yourself? This isn't about blame. It's not about self-accusation. It's about responsibility. And until you understand that you've allowed this, that you've prolonged what could no longer be sustained, change won't happen. Because no one can choose you if you haven't chosen yourself. No one can admire you if you're constantly justifying your existence. No one can care for you if you keep neglecting yourself in the name of love. Transformation doesn't start with nice words or New Year's resolutions. It starts when you stop saying, I have no choice, or this is just how life turned out for me. No. That resignation is poison, and every time you speak it, you bury yourself deeper into invisibility. You do have a choice. And the first, most urgent one is to stop being a spectator in your own life. Choose, decide, act, because no one's going to return what you gave away out of fear. Seneca said it with brutal clarity. As long as you blame others, your life belongs to them. And at this point in your life, you can't afford that anymore. You've lived too much, endured too much, to keep handing over control of your existence. There's no time left for excuses. You have to rise into yourself. You have to build respect from within, with firm decisions, even if they make others uncomfortable. Because if you don't place yourself at the center of your life, no one else will. And if your son doesn't react, if nothing changes, if he stays the same, at least you will have changed. And from that place, with that strength, you'll be able to face whatever comes without begging for uncertain affection. You'll be able to say to yourself, now, I am the woman I was meant to be. Not the perfect mother, not the silent martyr. The woman who chooses herself without asking for permission. Because that, only that, is where real respect begins. If you've already understood that true respect begins the moment you clearly choose yourself, then you also know there's no more time for delay. Because every day you don't change what you know is hurting you is another day you reinforce your own resignation. Now we arrive at the 8th point in this journey, and it's one of the hardest to apply, but also one of the most transformative. Emotional silence teaches too. We're so used to explaining, justifying, and repeating over and over what we feel, what we give, what we need, that we forget that often real change doesn't come through more words, but through fewer, through silence. But not the kind of silence that swallows anger or sinks into sadness. No, I'm talking about the silence that comes from firm boundaries, from mature understanding, from the decision to stop begging to be understood. Because there are moments when continuing to talk only reinforces your invisibility, and silence, when it comes from clarity, can be a stronger message than any speech. I want you to take this as an immediate action. The next time you feel the urge to explain why you're setting a boundary, don't. Just stand by your decision. Don't raise your voice, don't justify, don't seek approval. Be silent with dignity, because in that gesture, you're teaching more than any explanation ever could. You're saying, this is what I've decided, and I don't need your permission to stand by it. That silence isn't passive. It's powerful affirmation. But for this kind of silence to work, you need a strong mindset. You can't use it while secretly hoping the other person will react immediately or finally give you what you've been longing for. You must do it from a deep conviction that you're no longer available for relationships built on guilt, need, or manipulation. That your time, your energy, and your love are not on clearance. That you deserve respect, and that begins not with what you beg for, but with how you behave. The hardest part is holding that change without retreating when you feel like you're losing something. Because yes, sometimes you will lose. You might lose the comfort of certain relationships. You might lose the illusion that things can go back to how they were. But you will also gain your center, your peace, your clarity. And that is worth far more than any emotional reaction you might force from someone else. Don't expect to be heard if you keep explaining yourself as if you're guilty. Don't keep repeating your story to those who have no intention of understanding it. Speak when your words build something. And when you've said all you can, learn to stay quiet. A firm silence, a silence that teaches, a silence that protects your dignity. Because at this stage in life, your job is no longer to convince anyone. It's to live your truth. Calmly, steadily, and with the peace of someone who no longer needs to explain, only to be. Getting here hasn't been easy. You've faced uncomfortable questions, lingering decisions, and boundaries you'd never drawn before. Each point along this journey has been a call to take responsibility, to reconnect with your deepest truth. But there's still one last trap you need to confront. Because even when you know what you need to do, often you don't do it. Even when you've realized what you deserve, you keep postponing the moment to act. This is the 9th and final point of the video, and it could be the one that truly marks the difference between staying the same or stepping into a new way of living. Stop explaining yourself. Live as an example, not as an excuse. At this stage in life, it's common to fall into the trap of justification. It's too late for me. I don't want to cause conflict. I'd rather stay quiet because I don't have the strength. He's not going to change, so why should I? But behind those words isn't wisdom or peaceful acceptance. It's fear. It's avoidance. It's the desperate attempt to hold on to a sense of harmony that only exists if you keep shrinking yourself a little more each day. And that's not peace. It's submission disguised as maturity. Every time you choose to explain instead of decide, every time you say, yes, but, instead of taking action, you give away another piece of your authority. Not to your son, but to yourself. Because you no longer need to convince anyone. You need to live as an example, not as a woman pleading for understanding, but as a woman who embodies the clarity others are too afraid to carry. Here comes the hardest truth. If you don't make that decision, no one else will. No one's going to hand you the respect you haven't built. No one's going to give you space if you don't claim it. No one's going to truly see you if you keep hiding behind excuses that sound nice but hold no weight. This is the moment. Not because I say so, but because time won't wait. Because the life that's still ahead of you needs a version of yourself that doesn't keep apologizing for what you lacked, but rises for what you still can become. Viktor Frankl said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your freedom. You have that space now. What will you do with it? Will you keep explaining why you can't? Or will you begin to show, without words, that you are here, alive, clear-eyed, and no longer anyone's shadow? Don't put yourself on hold waiting for life to give something back. Life owes you nothing, but you owe yourself the chance to become what you've been postponing. You don't lead by speech. You lead by how you inhabit your home, your body, your time, by how you walk, how you stay quiet, how you hold your peace without needing permission. So stop explaining, stop asking to be understood. Start living in a way that makes respect not a request, but a natural result. Because when you become an example, you no longer need to convince anyone. Your very presence begins to say what your words never could. And that doesn't need to be argued. It's felt, it's respected, it's honored. If you've made it this far, it's not out of curiosity or entertainment. You're here because something in you no longer wants to live on autopilot, because you're tired of surrendering your life to routine, to fear, or to someone else's comfort. You've heard truths that hurt, yes, but they can also set you free. And now you're standing before a decision you can't keep putting off. You're not here to keep justifying yourself. You're here to take a firm step toward your own dignity, toward a life where respect isn't begged for or bargained with, but built through the truth of your actions. It's not a comfortable decision, it won't please everyone, but if you choose to stand by it, you'll reclaim something you didn't even realize you'd lost, your own center. Very few people have the courage to face what you've just walked through. This video hasn't been easy, and you know it. If you've made it to the end, it's because something inside you has already started to shift, even if silently. That's why I want you to write it in the comments. Tell me what country you're listening from and write this phrase: I no longer explain myself. I choose myself. That will be our sign of recognition, a simple but powerful declaration. Because what begins today doesn't end with this video. It marks a new way of living your life. My name is Gabriel, and this space we've created is called the Stoic Garden, not by accident. It's a place to plant dignity, clarity, and direction in a stage of life that many overlook or dismiss. We're not here to sugarcoat the truth. We're here to speak it with respect, with strength, and with the beauty that only real clarity can offer. This channel exists to remind you that you are not alone, but also to challenge you to take full responsibility for yourself, because no one else can do it for you. If this content stirred something in you, I invite you to subscribe, not as a symbolic gesture, but as part of a community that has chosen to wake up. A community that refuses to live on pause, that wants to think, feel, and act from a place of self-respect. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a sister, a friend, a mother, share it. Not to convince her, but to open a door. It's up to each of us to decide whether to walk through it. Stay now and watch one of the videos appearing on screen. This conversation isn't over because your story isn't over. And what's coming, if you choose it with clarity, could be the strongest, truest, most peaceful chapter of your life. That's what you're building now. Don't forget it.